you had him on your show, given all your experience of this kind of stuff, of addiction issues, of mental health issues, what do you make of this?
I think he should open himself up to evaluation.
Should he have access to his children?
Based on what you see in the media, I would have real questions about that.
This whole issue of how young men almost inevitably gravitate to people like Andrew Tate, in particular in relation to the show Adolescence.
As parents, we're not very glamorous voices in our child's ear compared to what they see on social media, and people like Andrew Tate give bad information to young men where they don't understand where boundaries are, and we're not preparing them to be thick-skinned. That's why Western civilization is on the slide.
It seems like the progressive left in particular, the last few years have delighted in scolding people.
You're not going to keep me from speaking out about that. My God, the death threats I get, the hate mail I get is terrible.
The legendary Dr. Phil has become an influential and moderating voice in US political debate, for which he has inevitably been attacked as everything from a MAGA lunatic to a sellout. His next special on Merit TV airs Wednesday and takes a detailed look at RFK Jr.'s quest to make America healthy again. It'll also be looking in detail at America's anger with the health insurance system after the murder of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson. To discuss all of that and much more, I'm delighted to welcome back to Uncensored the great Dr. Phil. Phil, how are you?
I'm well, Piers. How about you?
You know what? I feel like probably most people are a little bit discombobulated about what is going on in America right now. It feels fast, furious, a little chaotic, and highly unpredictable. How are you viewing it all?
Well, I think the same thing. Things are happening at a very fast pace, and I think that's both good and bad. And you know, I'm not a political expert. I don't know a lot about politics. I look at this from the cultural aspect in terms of how is this really impacting our culture, our families, our people, our kids, all of that sort of thing. And I'm not trying to be cagey or falsely humble or play word games when I say I'm not a political expert. I really don't know much about politics. I approach it from the standpoint of society and how it affects our culture. I don't think there's a big difference among all these politicians, to tell you the truth. I think they run some different agendas, and I'm glad sometimes that they do. But I do think things are happening really fast right now because President Trump is using executive orders to bring about a lot of change in a fast hurry.
There's no doubt that things like the policies on the southern border are having a dramatic and instantaneous effect for the good. There are record low numbers of people coming over illegally on the border within 10 weeks. So that's a clear win for Trump and his policies. Where it gets more complicated, it seems to me, is the whole tariff campaign that he's running. Because in the short term, that is always going to impact on the markets, on the economy. Potentially, it will lead to a spike in inflation again when it was just coming down and so on. He seems to be of the mind that he doesn't mind a bit of short-term financial pain because he believes ultimately there will be a lot of gain coming from America bringing manufacturing back to the United States. But do you think he's going to get the time to do this, Phil?
Well, you know, who knows what's going to happen with that kind of stuff. You know, when you start causing people pain, look, I've spent most of my life focused on why people do what they do and don't do what they don't do, which is motivation. And again, I don't understand the geoeconomics of all of this, but what I do know is that when you start to inflict pain on someone, when you start to cause people to have to pay up, then they get motivated. Will these tariffs stand for very long? I don't know. Will people start paying their fair share? You know, if it starts costing them the opportunity to sustain their livelihood in their countries, then yeah, I think it brings about change. And are these tariffs meant to be permanent and stay in place long enough to shift a lot of manufacturing back to the U.S. or just balance out trade. I don't know, but when you cause people to start losing business, they're going to start making changes. Look at what motivates people, and I think he's motivating people. Whether he's doing it to bring about change long-term or short-term, I don't know. We'll see. But he is, sometimes you have to shake it up to break it up, and he is shaking it up right now, and I think that's going to break up a lot of these patterns.
There's no question of that. Also, no question that Trump, he doesn't behave like a normal politician. In fact, he doesn't even behave like a normal conventional Republican or anything. You know, he can be all things to all people when it suits him. In a way, it's very refreshing. I think it unnerves people because he just doesn't behave in a predictable manner. But do you think that America needs a bit of unpredictability, that perhaps he's right to pursue this path?
Well, look, a lot of what's been going on hasn't been working. Look, we're $37 trillion in debt and continuing to spend like a drunken sailor on shore leave. Look, this doesn't work long term. And I've got grandchildren, and they're going to pick up the tab for all of this. So somebody needs to step up and say, wait a minute. This isn't working. Culturally, this isn't working. I mean, it's all well and good now. And listen, this isn't a Republican or Democrat thing. This is an American thing. You can't just print money when you need it. People, I think, sometimes don't realize what's happening. If you've got $100,000 saved up after a lifetime of working, and then somebody comes along and prints $1 billion more, your 100,000 just shrunk up. What your buying power for that just got a whole lot less. Somebody needs to come in and shake up this system. It just doesn't work. And I've been appalled. We've got this DOGE system right now, and is it a perfect system? Of course not. But everybody for decades and decades have said we have got to cut out the waste, fraud, and abuse in government. Now somebody's doing it with intentionality, and people are whining about it. They're out burning Teslas. They're throwing bricks through Tesla dealership windows. Grow up. Come on. That's not activism. That's vandalism. Those people should be put in jail. And is it perfect? No. They're wiping out some programs they shouldn't, and when they hit one they shouldn't, they should put it back immediately. But we need to get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse in government. Who disagrees with that? That's ridiculous.
You know, Phil, it's interesting. I've seen a pattern where you turned up at his Madison Square Garden rally just before he won the election, and you got hammered for it. You see Musk getting hammered because he switched sides to support Trump. You see Bill Maher, who's been very critical of Trump, now saying he's going to have dinner with him in the White House. He gets hammered. We've lost, something's gone wrong, I think, in a democratic society where people cannot respect an individual's right to support a party they want, to support a leader they want to, or just to change their mind if they want to. What's happening there? I don't always pick the healthiest food options. I'm sure you don't either. We're all human and we're all busy. That's why doctors created Field of Greens. One delicious glass of Field of Greens is like nutritional armor for your body. Each fruit and vegetable in this drink was selected by a doctor for specific health benefit. There's a heart health group, lungs and kidney groups, metabolism. It's all very complicated, but not with Field of Greens because it's all in there. It gives me energy, but it also gives me the confidence that I can be traveling or, shock horror, enjoying a sneaky burger, and I'll still be getting all the nutrition my body needs daily. Only Field of Greens makes you the better health promise. Your doctor will notice your improved health, or you'll get your money back. We've teamed up to give you a 20% discount on your first order. Just use promo code PEERS at brickhousenutrition.com/PEERS. That's code PEERS at brickhousenutrition.com/PEERS.
Well, I think it's the tyranny of the fringe, Piers. I think you've got people out there that say, look, we want to be inclusive. You know, we want to have everybody free speech, everybody have the right to do what they want to do. as long as you agree with us. And when you don't, then we're going to come after you hammer and tong and criticize you and call you names and all of that sort of thing. And that's what you mean by hammered. Well, just keep hammering me. I don't care, because you're not going to get me to stop saying what I think, feel, and believe because a bunch of people want to whine about it. I don't care. Go ahead. Cancel me, hammer me. I don't care. I'm going to say what I think, feel, and believe. And if people want to get on the internet and whine about it, then go ahead. Because there's just as many people on the other side that think, hey, it's a good thing that you're speaking out and saying what you need to say. I think that there is a lot of people right now in America that are sick of being bullied, sick of being muzzled, sick of not having the freedom to say what they really think and feel. And I think that pendulum's swinging back the other way. And I think we need to have the courage to step up and say what we think. I did show up at Madison Square Garden, and if you heard what I said, I meant what I said. I said, I'm not here necessarily to endorse Donald Trump, and I don't agree with everything he says or does, but I don't like people being bullied because they vote for him or stand up for him. And I said, and I'll go say the same thing at a Harris rally. We need to be able to say what we think, feel, and believe, and not be bullied for it.
Also, not to be scolded. It seems like the left, the progressive left in particular, the last few years have delighted in scolding people. They want to get enraged about a joke you tell, or a book you read, or a movie that you like, if it doesn't suit their progressive, so-called progressive agenda. Constantly lecturing and hectoring people. And I think that backlash has been quite furious, leading to Trump winning, him talking about the core of common sense at the heart of what he was talking about. And I do think that common sense has begun to replace wokeism as the preferred way that most Americans want to go. They just don't want to be scolded or lectured or hectored anymore. They want to be able to make decisions for themselves and be respected for those decisions.
Well, I think you're right. And I think that this heckler's veto has run its course. When I was in college, it was a long time ago. I agree. And I know people say things have changed. But there have been a lot of covered wagons going by lately. I get that. But we always had people of different points of view coming, and you went to listen to them if for no other reason than to find the holes in their arguments, to find ways that you could combat what they were saying. Now they don't let them speak. That's what I mean by heckler's veto. They shout them down, or they object so they don't come at all. You never are going to learn anything until you get out of your bubble. You learn by proving yourself wrong. And we've lost that in this country, and I think it's starting to come back. I speak out on behalf of Israel a lot, and that doesn't mean that I hate Palestinians. It doesn't mean that I like the fact that people are getting killed in Gaza. I hate that. War is ugly. I hate that. But you're never going to tell me that what happened on October 7th was a good thing or a smart thing to happen. And I stand up for the state of Israel. And there are people that disagree, and I respect that they disagree. But you're not going to keep me from speaking out about that. I think it was wrong, and I say so. And my God, the death threats I get, the hate mail I get is terrible. And how I hear things on college campuses now that I never thought I would hear in my lifetime. The anti-Semitic rhetoric that I hear on our elite college campuses are shocking to me.
Yeah, I think it's extraordinary that is happening, that is being tolerated. You're now seeing the Trump administration moving to deport some of the ringleaders behind this stuff. that has in itself led to people saying, well, how can you be the party of free speech and throw people out for having views you don't agree with? What do you say to those people?
Well, there's a difference between free speech and inciting people to violence. There's a difference between free speech and actually materially supporting terror groups that have killed Americans, taken American hostages, and continue to do so. And if someone had presented themselves to immigration authorities and said, I'd like to come into America, and by the way, I support terror groups that want Americans dead, have killed Americans, are attacking Americans, and holding American hostages, I'd like to come into your country. I just want you to know that I'm aligned with these people. Would we have handed them a golden ticket into America? The answer is not just no, but hell no. And when they come into America and stand on the campus of Columbia and say, we're not leaving until they meet our demands, you're a guest here. And you're saying that you are affiliated with terror groups that want Americans dead and have killed Americans? No, I'm sorry. Your guest privileges are canceled.
Lots of other stories bubbling around I wanted to talk to you about. One of which, just because I know you've been vocal on this already, this whole ongoing thing with Kanye West. So he has 32 million followers on X and has been on a kind of relentless tear now for 5-6 weeks. A lot of the stuff he's posting is pretty repellent. It's anti-Semitic, it's pro-Nazi, and so on. He's now turned on Kim Kardashian, his ex-wife, saying he wished he'd never had kids with her, and so on. You know, if you had him on your show, given all your experience of this kind of stuff, of addiction issues, of mental health issues, of relationship issues, but what do you make of this?
Well, if I had him sitting before me right now, I would I would say as a parent, any parent has an undivided loyalty to their children. And I think that once you become a parent, that's both a noun and a verb. You know, you become a parent, that's the noun. You have to be a parent, that's a verb. And I think if you start to behave in a way that can put your children in jeopardy, that you can expose them to other people or ideology or behaviors that can jeopardize their mental, emotional, physical, spiritual well-being, that you should be willing to take a hard look at yourself and at least have yourself evaluated to see whether or not you're making rational decisions. I can't render an opinion on Kanye West because I've never met him. All I see is what's in the media, which I don't trust as far as I can throw. But based on what I do see, I think it's a fair question to say that I think he should open himself up to evaluation and see if maybe there are some mental illness processes underway. And if so, if he can get some help for that, because if he's running his own agenda and he's not in control of that, I'm not making excuses for him, but I'm saying if there is something amiss there, and so much of mental illness we're now learning is neurologically based, not just purely psychological, then I think he should be open to being evaluated. I think anytime we're called into question about what influence we may be having on our children, we think we should put their interest ahead of our own. And if that means having ourselves looked at, monitored, we should be open to that.
Should he have access to his children through this period, you think, given how extreme a lot of his behavior seems to be? Piers Morgan Uncensored is now proudly independent. If you like the show, we ask for only one thing. Subscribe on YouTube and follow Piers Morgan Uncensored on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Now let's get straight to the point. Support for today's show comes from a business focused on a critical issue: prosperity. US national debt is at crisis levels, inflation has made life more expensive for everybody, and the stock market is precarious. It's enough to make anyone's financial future feel grim. So what is the solution? Well, a simple one is to opt out of the chaos and invest in something solid and reliable: physical, gold and silver. And there's only one name you need to remember: American Hartford Gold. This company has earned the trust of thousands of customers with an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau and glowing reviews you can see for yourself. They offer an incredible range of gold and silver bars and coins. They can be delivered directly to your door, or they'll help you set them up in a tax-advantaged gold IRA. First-class customer service makes the whole process simple, secure, and straightforward. American Hartford Gold is committed to getting the truth out there and giving you peace of mind in uncertain times. And if that wasn't enough, you'll get up to $15,000 worth of free silver when you make your first purchase and mention my name, Piers. So make the smart move. Call 866-692-2474 or text Piers, that's P-I-E-R-S, to 65532. That's 866-692-2474 or text Piers to 65532. All the details are in the description. Now on with the show.
Well, your key word there is seems to be, based on what I've seen and heard. And like I say, I don't know what kind of father he is behind closed doors. I don't know how loving and nurturant and caring he is. I don't know what he says to those children behind closed doors. Based on what you see in the media, I would have real questions about that. But again, I can't evaluate him. I can't render an opinion on him because I haven't evaluated him.
The other person who's been a lot in the news. Yeah, no, I understand. The other person who's been in the news a lot this week is Andrew Tate and his brother Tristan. And this coincides with a big Netflix smash hit show. It's actually from the UK. It's called Adolescence, about a 13-year-old boy accused of murdering a young girl after he was exposed to very misogynist online material and subjected to cyberbullying. And it introduced what people have dubbed the incel culture, I guess, to the mainstream. It's been a big hit, #1 on Netflix in the UK and US. You've raised a couple of boys yourself, Phil. I've raised 3 boys myself. You see what they're exposed to now. I mean, you and I have talked a lot about what we used to be exposed to and what happens these days. But this whole issue of how young men almost inevitably gravitate to people like Andrew Tate because they feel a little bit disenfranchised from society, certainly in the last few years, but maybe scrabbling to work out what it means to be male, to be a man, to be masculine. What do you think of this, and in particular in relation to this show Adolescence and what it has highlighted? What can we do as a society to help young men?
I'm so glad you bring that up because, I've said to parents for 30, 45 years, starting when I began in private practice and certainly when I've been on the air speaking to millions of people that, you're not going to be the only voice in your child's ear, so you need to make sure you're the best voice in your child's ear. And I think that so often as parents, we're not very glamorous voices in our child's ear compared to what they see on social media and the media in general. And I really worry of late when you look at the ratio of these kind of woke left professors in universities versus the more conservative professors in universities. It's way overbalanced. And so many of them, for a while, there was this idea of toxic masculinity, and then it kind of became that masculinity itself is toxic. And so it leaves a void of what is masculinity and what is okay. And that's where people like Andrew Tate can find a hole and a wedge to get in there and give bad information to young men where they don't understand the difference between being masculine but treating women with dignity and respect and knowing where boundaries are. And I think that's a failure of society to have good role models. I think when we have fathers that are absent from the home and the child doesn't have a strong role model, that leaves a void, and it can be filled with misinformation. And I think that's tragic. I think we need to do everything we can to provide good role models. You know, I grew up with an alcoholic father that was often violent and absent and drunk and all sorts of things. But, you know, fortunately, I made a choice to not ever drink. And sometimes you can go against your role model or for it. But I also grew up with team sports, and so I had coaches that taught discipline and hard work and things like that. So there are ways to get these things, but we need to value it as a society. And if we don't value it, then why would young men aspire to it? You have to give them a reason that that's something that they would want to mimic, they would want to aspire to. So we have to amplify and elevate the role models that we want young men to aspire to.
There was a great book written recently by Jonathan Haidt, which he charted really the problems from 2010 when phones became smartphones and now they scramble young people's brains. But his conclusion was that we have overprotected children in the real world and we've underprotected children online. Would you agree with that?
I couldn't agree with it more, and Jonathan has the data to support that. And there's a lot of data to support that. I think we're not preparing. You know, our job as adults, as educators and parents, is to prepare children for the next level of life. And I don't think we're doing a very good job of that. I don't think we're preparing them for the competition. You know, you and I are in a highly competitive environment, right? They grade our paper every day and publish the grade. Yeah. And so we're in a highly competitive Shark Tank, but the world is that way. You see it every day, and we're not preparing them for the competition of a meritocracy. And we are in a capitalist society, whether people like it or whether they don't. They can talk about this equality of outcome all they want, but that ain't the way the real world works. And so you can sit around in a circle and talk about it at the student union at college, and you get all warm and fuzzy, but you get out in the world, you get paid for performance. And we're not preparing them to be thick-skinned. We're not preparing them to compete. We're not comparing them for pay for performance. And I think that's why the Western civilization is on the slide. We're not number one in math, science, reading, a lot of things in America that we were several decades ago. We're now down in the mid-teens at best.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think the two most evil words I've heard in modern times were participation prizes, because of the malevolent impact that had on kids, where they think that coming last, you get a prize. You know, when I was competing as a kid at school, if you came last, there was a good dollop of shame and ignominy attached to it, which made you not want to come last again. But if you get a prize for coming last and a prize for coming first, where is the incentive to work hard to try and win?
Yeah, listen, the difference between winners and losers is winners do things losers don't want to do in the real world. But if they both get a pizza party and a trophy, what the hell's the difference?
Yeah.
If that's what you're teaching
Ridiculous.
kids, you get a pizza party and a trophy, and you didn't win a game. I coached my boys in basketball, both of them for 7 years each. And, you get in, they have the 10 to 12. When you get in at 10, you go 0 and 13. It's hard to motivate them. But in that first year, you learn how to lose, and it doesn't feel very good. And you want them to feel that sting because it doesn't feel very good. But then in the next year, okay, now they kind of go 6 and 6. And in that last year, they go 13 and 0, and they go, wow, I like that feeling of being a winner. You got to teach them that. And if they don't feel the difference, then they haven't learned what they needed to learn.
I always felt with my kids, they all love sport. Some of them are very good at, well, they're all good at different sports. But I always said to them, I don't care if you perform badly, but I do care if you don't give it 100%. I don't see the point of doing anything if you don't try the very best that you can. But we've encouraged a mindset, I think, with young people where you don't need to do that. Where almost there's a kind of glory in failure. You can do the virtue signaling stuff. You can say, oh, I'm so proud of myself. I came last, but I failed at this, but I'm so proud of myself. And it's like, why? Out of interest, why are you so proud of yourself for losing or failing? When did it become shameful to want to win and to see anything but win? I remember Tiger Woods once being asked about golf, and his caddy saying, for Tiger, coming second is a terrible, terrible result. Even in a sport like golf, where most golfers would see coming second at the Masters as a great achievement, he said the only achievement for Tiger was winning. And I don't understand why any sportsman would not share that view, or anyone in life, in the media. No. Why would you or I want to wake up and not be number one, not to win, or not to at least aspire to be number one?
Yeah, and you reach for it. You don't always get it, but you reach for it. My friend David Foster, the great music producer, said, good is the enemy of great. And he couldn't have been more right. It's easy to be good. It's not easy to be great. And I think we've just settled. And, that's, we see it in America. And we've allowed this to happen to us. That's why I've been so focused on this MAHA, this Make America Healthy Again, because we're, right now, that's the special that we're doing. The CDC, which I'm not a great fan of, but if you use their statistics, they estimate that 40% of children in America have chronic health conditions. Piers, 40%. And in 1960,
Shocking.
It was 2%. What the hell's happened? Half the kids in America almost have a chronic disease. And 70% of young people couldn't even qualify for military service if we needed them to. Why? Because they're sitting around on their phones and eating processed foods and chemicals that they shouldn't be eating. So we're just allowing this to get away from us. And the good news is this is something we can change in one generation. We can wipe this out in one generation. You and I'll be gone, but our grandkids won't. And we can eradicate this in one generation.
I was in Saudi Arabia for the first time recently, and the Crown Prince there, he's very young, he's 39. He has a population, 2/3 of Saudis are under 35. And he's just brought in a thing where he wants every young person in Saudi Arabia to have exercise at least 3 times a week. And I was like, yes, that of course, that should be what every country does, right, with its youth. Get them out of their lairs where they're on their phone 10 hours a day, playing the video games and stuff, and get them into fresh air, competing at sport, or just doing stuff. Anything that's exercise is going to help them.
Yeah, you break a sweat, man. Get off the couch, put the phone down, and get out and do something. And we've got to stop feeding them all of these chemicals, and that is so easy to do. We've got thousands of chemicals in our foods here that they don't put in their foods in Europe, and we're way sicker here. Out of the 38 developed countries, we're 33 in terms of sick children. We're way at the bottom of the list, and they're putting things in our foods here, preservatives, that they don't put in the foods over where you got. Look at our
Well,
Fruit Loops and look at
Phil,
the UK's Fruit Loops.
Well, let me tell you about bread, right? So if you buy a loaf of bread, fresh bread in the UK, sliced bread from the supermarket, you might get a week out of it before it starts to mold, right? And you see the mold. In LA, where I have a home, you can buy a loaf of bread. It's still sitting there 6 weeks later, pristine. Only it's not pristine. It's being artificially preserved by God knows what. But I always say it comes down to the bread. It's like, if you're doing that to the bread, what the hell are you doing to the other stuff?
You don't want your food to last. You're supposed to buy it and eat it. You don't want it to last. If it's lasting, these people talk about finding a fast food hamburger under the couch. It's 6 months old. It looks the same way it did the day you bought it. I wouldn't eat it, but it looks the same because it's got so many preservatives in it. Oh, this is ridiculous. And we don't realize what all is in the foods that we're eating. These chemicals are not good for us. And these cooking oils we're using, this was stuff they were using to lubricate tanks in the war. And then they didn't need it anymore, so they just started processing it into cooking oil. And we're eating that. People just don't know it. We need to tell them this. If we will stop this, we can get healthy again. To me, I'm passionate about this because we can eradicate this in one generation. We take all of that stuff out, but the reason we're not is because of corporate capture. Those people making those chemicals and selling those chemicals have so much money they're spending in Congress with lobbying. They're spending more than the oil and gas lobbies. It's unbelievable. We've got to get that out of our food supply here, and you'll see people starting to get healthy again.
Are you a big supporter of RFK Jr.? He's been getting a lot of flack in some areas, but it seems to me his heart's in the right place.
It is in the right place. And look, the thing that I am a big supporter of RFK Jr., and I don't agree with everything that he's ever said or done, but I'll tell you what he is committed to is science, and not science that is funded by the corporations that are researching what's being researched. He is a very much committed to science individual, empirical results that can be replicated by independent laboratories with proper sample sizes and proper methodology to determine what is the actual scientific impact of what's being studied. And somebody smarter than me said it, I would rather have questions I can't answer than answers I can't question. And we should be able to question all the answers that we're getting right now and say, look, I want to question this. I want to study this. I want to look into this and see whether or not this is actually the truth. And if it is, okay. And if it's not, then we need to go with what is the truth. And RFK is very much committed to looking at the science and getting these chemicals right. And he's taking on sodas, he's taking on food, he's taking on a lot of different things, and we should be willing to look at the data. If he's wrong, throw it out. If he's right, embrace it. Just look at the data. It's not about him, it's about the science.
The fact that Utah is now banning the fluoride in public water, what do you think of that?
Well, it has to do with the amounts, and Robert will tell you the same thing. It is a chemical waste. It has to do with how much fluoride you're getting. And because now there's so much fluoride in toothpaste and stuff, we don't need it in water. And if you look at a lot of the European countries that have done the studies and banned it, if it's not a legitimate question, why are countries around the world studying it and ultimately banning it? So the question is, how much is enough and how much is too much? So fluoride in toothpaste and in low concentrations is a good thing. If it gets too high a concentration, it becomes a bad thing. And that's true of a lot of stuff. And So when people look at it, they have to say, don't just jump at, well, oh, here's another nutty assertion. It has to do with concentrations and amounts. And there are some places where it's higher concentration in waters than others. And if you add that to what they're getting in toothpaste and other sources, then it can get too high a concentration. So it's one of those questions that bears, one of those answers that bears looking at. Let's question it and see whether or not we should take it out of the water or whether we shouldn't. I think it's a legitimate question.
Yeah, it's interesting. It reminds me a little bit of what you said earlier about the way successive governments for decades have not tackled America's debt and so on. Is that the conventional way of doing things, whether it's reducing the debt, the deficit, whatever it may be, whether it is reducing the health issues in America, the conventional ways of tackling these things have clearly, demonstrably failed. So this trust that people have put in their governments and the establishment practiced ways of trying to resolve these issues has not been successful, indisputably. Otherwise, America wouldn't be $17 trillion in debt. Otherwise, you wouldn't have the appalling health record now of so many Americans. So I'm with you. It's like, well, let's just challenge orthodoxy, because orthodoxy doesn't seem to get us very far.
No, it doesn't. And look, people talk about RFK Jr., and if he said some things that you disagree with, then look, disagree with them. But look at each thing individually and see whether or not there is science to support it, or if there's not. We've got corporate capture of so many different industries in the United States. And again, I'm not looking at this politically. There aren't Democrat children. There aren't Republican children. There are just children. And if we're poisoning our children with chemicals, then we need to stop doing that. If we have a society that is not healthy, that's not exercising, that are living on their phones, and it's not just physical health. We have the highest levels of depression, anxiety, and loneliness among young people than we have seen since we started keeping records. Why is that? There are a number of reasons that that's true. Being on their phones all the time is one of them, because they're not participating in life. Having poor physical health is a reason. There are lots of reasons, but we've got the poorest mental health among our young people right now than we've ever had since we started keeping records. How is that possible? This is an epidemic, and people won't even talk about it.
It really is, and extremely concerning. Well, you've got this special Make America Healthy Again on Merit TV is on Wednesday. You've also got another special coming up on April 22nd on Merit TV, America's Anger with Insurance Companies. Obviously, this relates to the murder of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson and the sort of deification and glorification of his accused killer, Luigi Mangione. Tell me about your views on this.
You said it very eloquently, as you often do. There are two strands to this. One is I absolutely unqualifiedly condemn someone walking up behind an insurance company executive and shooting them in the back of the head and killing them. There is no reason that you can ever come to justify doing that. I don't care what your circumstance or situation is, that there's nothing to justify that. That's not justice, that's murder, and that person will pay the price for doing that. I don't care how much you want to glorify him. And there were people celebrating that, and it was disgusting to me. Now, having said that, taking that aside, the conduct of these insurance companies in so many cases is absolutely appalling because there's no question that they're putting the balance sheet ahead of the individual's well-being. And I understand that insurance companies, like everybody else, has to make money, but the pattern and practice of denying claims, delaying claims, deflecting claims, and what they've got is people that are not healthcare trained, they're not doctors in many instances, making decisions about whether to approve procedures that physicians have recommended, prescribed in cancer patients, for example. And then some bureaucrat in an insurance company says, nah, we're not going to approve that. We think that's experimental. We think this, we think that. Or they delay it. In the meantime, their attitude is, these people change jobs, this will move on and become somebody else's problem. They're fighting a war of attrition. The problem is the disease progression just keeps on going, and it's costing people's lives. And it's absolutely, when you listen to the whistleblowers, when you look at the statistics, it's absolutely appalling that they're allowing this to happen. And they're so big that it's hard to get to them and hold them to account. And so they're just red taping people to death.
It's absolutely shocking. We started with politics, Phil. We're going to end with a bit of politics. Just quickly, I want to play you a clip. This is Gavin Newsom talking to Bill Maher about how the Democrat brand's gone toxic.
It's really been interesting, the reaction to the podcast. I mean, we had some controversial figures on, I'll acknowledge that, and Steve Bannon, Charlie Kirk. This idea that we can't even have a conversation with the other side.
You have to. They won.
Thank you. These guys are crushing us. The Democratic brand is toxic right now. We had a high water mark 2 weeks ago, and that was a CNN poll at 29% favorability. It's dropped in the NBC poll down to 27%. It's one thing to make noise, but you also have to make sense. And I think with this podcast and having the opportunity to dialogue with people I disagree with, it's an opportunity to try to find common ground.
Now, I find it quite refreshing that Gavin Newsom is saying all that. But the Democrats are polling that 27% favourability, the lowest in its history. What has gone wrong with the Democrats, do you think? How do they fix it?
Well, I don't know that we have a Democratic Party right now. I think it got hijacked by these fringe wokesters, and I've always considered myself an independent, and I vote for the individual. I vote for policies. I vote for things that make common sense to me, and I don't think a lot of people that have switched or left, they tell me I didn't leave the Democratic Party, the Democrat Party left me. And I think a lot of people feel that way, that they don't even have what used to be the Democratic Party, that everybody is way, way left of Bernie Sanders, and they've all gone to socialism. And I think they'll find their way back. I think Gavin Newsom is posturing for a run for president. So I think he was part of that way far left and decided, I can't do that. I lived in California for 20 years and saw the things that he was advocating for and signing off on, until I think he put his sights on the White House, and then all of a sudden he stopped advocating for those things and distancing himself from them. So I think he's posturing for a run at the White House at this point. So all of a sudden he's willing to talk to folks, and I'm glad to see that he is. Maybe he's coming back to his senses.
I'm doing a book called Woke is Dead, coming out in October. Do you think it's dead, or is it dying, or are the last stragglers still trying to hang in there?
I think the last stragglers are trying to hang in there, but I think it's dead, and I think it should be dead. I think there were, when they started cannibalizing each other, I think is when it died. I think when they started canceling each other and feeding on themselves and eating their young, I think that's when it it got. I think that's when it got bad. But you know, they started pushing. It wasn't enough to say we can live in peace and harmony, even with some of our groups that have maybe been on the margins of society that can now be accepted and live in harmony. That wasn't enough. It's like, no. It's not enough to be accepted. You have to stand up and declare that we're right and you're wrong. That's when they pushed too far and they woke up the heartland in America, at least. And people said, no, you pushed too far. I'm not going there. And I think the pendulum swung. And I think it will swing back, but maybe it'll land in the middle. You know, I always tell people, you don't have to love everything about somebody to love that person. And you don't have to love everything about somebody's ideology to coexist with them. We need to start listening, and anytime I negotiate with somebody, I always start by saying, let's begin by talking about everything we agree on. And once we get that done, then we can talk about what we disagree on. Because once you talk about everything that you do agree on, you find out that what you disagree on is a lot less than you thought. And I think that's true in America. I don't think we're nearly as divided as the media wants to make everybody think, feel, and believe, because that sells tickets. Divisiveness sells tickets. But, you know, think about it. We all want a healthy country, right? We all want a good economy. We all want our children to grow up in a great country with green grass and clear water and enough money to take care of themselves and their children. All want to grow up in peace and harmony. Everybody wants the same things. It's just a matter of how we get there, and that's negotiable. And I know I'm being very macro and oversimplifying it, but it's not a bad attitude to begin with.
You know what, Dr. Phil? I find I agree with almost everything you ever say. That's why I love having you on Uncensored, because you're a voice of common sense. And I like to think I am too. It's probably why we get on so well. Brilliant to have you back on Uncensored, and congrats on all the ongoing success with Merit TV, and great to have you back. Thank you.
Well, it's good talking to you, and when you get that book ready, you need to let me help you launch it, and let's get that thing up and running.
I would love to. Woke is Dead is coming soon.
All right.
Thanks a lot, Phil.
Woke is dead. Thanks a lot, Piers. Talk to you soon.
All the best. Take care. Piers Morgan Uncensored is proudly independent. The only boss around here is me. If you enjoy our show, we ask for only one simple thing. Hit subscribe on YouTube and follow Piers Morgan Uncensored on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And in return, we will continue our mission to inform, irritate, and entertain. And we'll do it all for free. Independent, uncensored media has never been more critical, and we couldn't do it without you.